Punita Sinha runs an international fund. Now, one of the things that we're seeing is that net FDI inflows into India was just $0.8 billion in the first 6 months of this fiscal. And even FPI, portfolio investment, has been, there's been more outflow than inflow on a net basis. How do you see that change? You know, what would foreign investors be looking at from this budget to try and divert some of the money they've taken to economies like the US? And where they put the money was in those magnificent 7 tech stocks. Those now have taken a hit. So there is some potential to bring that money to India. What can Sitharaman do to make it happen?
Well, first of all, as I said earlier, Nirmala Sitharaman can only control the domestic side of the economy, right? And foreign investors, why are they investing in India? For the India consumption story, for the growth. And so to that extent that growth is stimulated and the growth resumes, and the valuations will start looking better and they will come back. So it's a very rational decision. It's growth versus valuation. Why they were taking money out was because valuations had gotten very frothy and growth was beginning to decelerate. The earnings estimates were coming down, and at the same time, China and other countries, the valuations had become a lot cheaper. And if you see,
but in that sense, foreign investors were smarter than domestic investors who stayed invested also because they didn't have much of a choice. The foreign investors ran with their money.
No, well, it's not even that they were smarter. They had the choice.
Sure.
The domestic investors didn't have the choice. So what are they supposed to do? Go into cash or gold or real estate? The foreign investors, when you have a choice and you can compare valuation, there's arbitrage opportunities, and that's what you will do. But now the domestic investors also in the last 2 months have slowed down. The SIP data shows there's a slowdown. The gross numbers and the net numbers are showing that even new SIPs are not being created at the same rate. And a lot of speculative, derivative retail investors are also on the sidelines. You ask many people, till about 3 months ago, even a yoga teacher was into the market, a doctor was into the stock market, and now they've gotten burnt recently. So whoever you talk to says, no, I'm on the sideline. So they'll come back if the valuation growth equation and the math works.
Limited point. Yoga teacher, I think, is well trained to be in the stock market or in the derivatives market, given that he can do headstands and all the asanas. I mean, the large part of the story is that what is India's attraction is the scale of the domestic economy, the population, the working age population, and all that. And how do you do growth? I mean, the finance ministers over sort of decades have talked about the resilience, about this. So I have a feeling that sometimes governments sort of behave like they're at the airport, at the carousel belt where the luggage arrives. You missed one chance. They say, "Oh, ठीक है, घूम के आ ही जाएगा, growth आ ही जाएगा, क्या problem है?"
No, it's like Chidambaram in a recent article saying that you don't need government. Indian economy will grow at 5% even without government. If you want to take it from 5 to 8 to 10, that's when you need strong government intervention. Now, you could argue that, once you're in opposition, you can get away with a lot of things that you can't say when you're in government. But either way, I think really these are, I think we've reached a stage, Rahul, after 10 years. Mr. Modi had a long honeymoon period, more than any other prime minister has had, frankly, in recent memory. The honeymoon is over. And I think 2024 in that sense was the wake-up call. 2025 poses fresh challenges because of the global situation, because of domestic considerations. I come back to it, Rahul. There are no excuses left anymore. This is Nirmala Sitharaman's chance to make history. I asked all of you, which was the budget you most remember? And everyone went back to 1991. That tells you a story in a way. That over the last 34 years, barring 2017 was mentioned by some because of GST, someone mentioned 1997 because of Chidambaram's dream budget in terms of tax cuts. But truth of the matter is that just 3 budgets over 34 years.
No, but that would always be the case. I would say that's the first burst of reforms that you have when you are a controlled economy and you're liberalizing. The first few budgets will always be the most highly impactful. That is, but it is a natural outcome of
that's giving a free pass to many finance ministers and many of their budgets. They've missed opportunities over the years.
But once you've done industrial delicensing, how do you top that? I mean, there can be
you don't do that, but there are other things to do. Surely there are. Agriculture was a big challenge.
So the biggest challenge that no finance minister is able to address is agriculture. If you fix that, if the 16% of GDP becomes, say, 20% of the GDP, disperses across a much wider population, working age population, whatever. Or if you take industry across. I mean, one sitting duck opportunity for the last 10 years. This government, before it came, had 100 smart cities in its first manifesto. Now, you don't need to build another Calcutta or Mumbai or Delhi. You can build smaller cities. I mean, construction, real estate is at the intersection of the urban and rural economy. So you can create jobs that matter, incomes that matter. So you can create 10 small cities. Every state can create one city. I mean, you have the freight corridor, you have the industrial corridor, you have the SEZ corridor, you have all the opportunity. I mean, what is the issue of the affordable housing is the cost of land. So if you create new cities, the cost of land diminishes. So these are all ideas that have been there in circulation, that have been there in discussion. But the thing is that in India, everything waits for a crisis or one. So I always call that India has next gen reforms is actually next generation reforms. Because if you remember, FDI in insurance was opened by Yashwant Sinha and it was expanded by Jayant Sinha. So I call it the Sinha to Sinha reforms. So, this is the truth about India. I mean, you can't run away from it.
So that's the budget I remember.
I think
you said which budget do you remember? I remember my father-in-law's budget, Mr. Yashwant Sinha.
So the 2003 one in particular, where he brought in fiscal responsibility
that insurance,
as well.
FDI was seen as a very big reform at that time, right? Now no one talks about it. Similarly, labor is now considered to be like, of course you should do it. I mean,
I remember
these
the
are
number of
ways the
text messages
shifted.
between Murli Devra and Yashwant Sinha, because Murli Devra was the standing committee of finance head and Yashwant Sinha was the finance minister. The number of SMS messages they exchanged that things are moving, it almost became 49. And then within the BJP, there was opposition, so it went back to 26.
Therefore, given that situation that you say that a crisis sometimes spurs budget makers... No, 1 minute. A crisis spurs budget makers at times to go ahead with the kind of reforms that are much needed that otherwise would not take place. This is an opportunity. 2025 is as good an opportunity as you have. The government is stable. There are no major elections. You've got, on the other hand, global headwinds and a slowing down of the economy. If you don't do it now, when will you?
I don't know whether we are at the tipping point. Okay, Rajdip. I always believe that crisis is a feel-good factor in India's economy. That's the only time change happens because the choice is wrenched away. But whether we are there, I'm not sure because there are things that, how much more disastrous can agriculture get? How unviable can farming get for you to get there? But it's still not moved.
I have a different perspective on agri because I've been on an agri-chemical board for 10 years. I finished my term. So I've seen all the different efforts that companies are making, that the government is making, but it's a very tough problem to tackle because despite everything, farmers have so many things out of their control. The monsoon still is a very big thing. The climate change is creating a lot of havoc. The insects are eating up the plants. The new insects come up. So even the companies are trying to keep up, with the right chemical to deal with the insect, but a new insect comes up because of climate change. And the weather patterns are creating, crop variations that are required. So it's such a big issue that I think if they should tackle climate change as well.
No, but it is one of the successes. I was reading Harish Damodharan, who's probably the country's finest agricultural journalist, and he had an interesting article about how urea has been an investment success story in the last decade. That as many as 6 new plants, a 7th in the pipeline, have been commissioned at a cost of over 60,000 crores since 2019. And all of these in the green revolution state. So there are things happening. So it's not as if it's been a complete, disaster. And the government did try. You recall when it comes to agriculture, it didn't work.